Well, howdy. Sorry for being a little late. I was late getting my chores done and everything that needed to happen. So I'm sitting here just trying to throw everything together last second. At least my mic is where it's supposed to be, so I count that all as a win. I see all have already gotten busy with the questions. Like, that's interesting. So we'll definitely go through that. Let's give everyone a few minutes to hop on, though. Um, and let's see. Let's say howdy to everyone who's in chat first. Let's see. We've got Chato. So howdy to you, sir. We've got Tom Paul Cajun, Susan Robertson. By the way, Chato, did you used to be Titan? Because I don't know now. Unfortunately, the logo, everything seems the same. Gene Hudson, Susan Robertson, A. Brunson, Mary H. Yeah, it's everyone in town. So yeah, Chato, let me know if you're a Titan and you just change, because every time one of y'all changes your things, it gets hard. Because okay, cool. Oh, hi CJ, welcome. Cool. Yeah, unfortunately, sometimes like Cheese Freak Ginger Snap, when she made that change, it was like, who is this person? Ah, so it's been a day. First of all, let's keep Bigfoot Michigan Rob in our prayers. He has lost power. They had some storms yesterday, uh, and he's lost his power. They're not expecting to have it back until Tuesday, so that's going to be kind of rough because it's humid as all get out right now because of all that. I used to be. Oh, okay. So now you're all. Thank you, CJ. See, now I know who everyone is. So CJ is Titan's daughter. She used to be Beta. Okay, now we. Thank you. Like I can't keep up with this. Yeah, Gene. Yeah, Lower Michigan hit really hard. So he's like I said, he's lost power until at least Tuesday. Obviously, was praying for him to get power sooner than that. But it's real humid right now because of all the rain they've been getting. So let's keep him in our prayers. Also, I'm going to ask just for a personal request. I have to be vague for legal reasons. I'll say it this way: I'm fine. Don't worry about it. But I did get a call and about a situation that I need God to make some things very very clear on, so I can know how to move forward. Um, it's a delicate situation, and I would like some clarity and definitely something tangible to work off of on that one. So, so again, prayer would be appreciated. And once the situation is resolved, I can let y'all know about it. And in fact, I will let you know about it. But unfortunately, I just can't talk about it now. So y'all know. But let's definitely keep Bigfoot Michigan Rob in prayer because you know it sucks when it's hot and humid and you everything's down. You got no power. Like that's just a hard place to be right now. And that's the other thing. Just as a complete aside, it has nothing to do with anything. It's like, well, didn't people used to live without air conditioning, 100 years, even 60, 70 years ago? And it's like, yes, but the houses back then were designed to be lived in without AC. These modern houses are not. Like that's a big difference that we often don't realize is a lot of these older houses were designed with the fact they didn't have AC in mind, right? And so they were airflow, things like that was a big deal that you don't have in these modern homes. So just something to think about. Yes, thank you, Gene, for reminding us. So his Bigfoot Michigan Rob, his mom's living with him right now, and so that's going to be hard on her as well, particularly with the humidity. So let's keep her in our prayers as well. That's a big thank you, Gene, for reminding me. I completely forgot. But he's grilling, and he's having people over because they have all this food they got to eat. So, it's like anything else. When there's always a silver lining, which is a party. Parties are always a silver lining. So let's start off with Titan Chato, formerly known as Titan. Um, Concerning Hosea 4:6, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Would that seem self-evident, but knowing what, or is it who? His people do not know. Also, the word is described as a sword. Certainly, if we are, as we okay. So actually, Hosea 4:6, my people have perished for lack of knowledge. That's actually something I did a deep dive on like 2 years ago. And the thing that I discovered about that is it's not the knowledge or the wisdom that's the emphasis or that we should be looking at. It's it's the word lack. I think because we are mistranslating that word lack of knowledge. It's not that they're ignorant. There is a deliberate rejection of knowledge in that uh, in the tenses that are used in that in Hosea 6. It isn't just that they were ignorant of the thing; they were actively rejecting that knowledge. And I think, which your second question is is uh, is on the right spot. The idea that the word is described as a sword. Well, the thing is, it's not just knowledge as in science or history. It was knowledge of the word, of what God, of the laws God had given them. Is that broader context? So it isn't just like they were like it's in English. It seems like we're like the Bible saying you need to go to school, like stay in school, get your high school diploma, go to college. That's not what they're talking about. It's that they had rejected the knowledge of God. It's that they had rejected His laws, His teachings, moral, the whole nine yards, and it was a willful thing. Sorry, I'm all congested today. And I will take this one step further. We're seeing that play out right now. That's what we're seeing, right? We're looking at people who are supposedly the most educated. Like Nazi Germany had one of the most educated populations in human history. Like just straight up. Percentage of the population that graduated a higher education, percentage of people who could read. Nazi Germany had one of the most well-educated populations ever. And we see how well that turned out. And right now, look at all the people we have who graduate from college. Look at our literacy rates, at least for people who are born here. It's amazing. And yet, all of the intelligentsia, they can't make a right call. It's something that Rush Limbaugh actually said years ago. He goes, "What is smart?" Because simply being educated doesn't make you smart. Being smart is being right. Taking the information that you have and making the right calls. That is smart. We have all these educated people running around, and they're all doing really stupid things. They're believing stupid things. Why? Because they got no knowledge of God. God is, again, if God is truth, and we know that He is, then rejecting Him is ultimately a desire to reject truth. That's why we look around and we have all these people who are like, has everyone lost their mind? The answer is yes, because they've rejected the place from which true wisdom comes. So, and yes, reading our Bibles the way it was intended to be read, to them. Again, it was written to them, but it's for us, so we can. And that's sort of the beauty of this. Is the problem is we often try to read the Bible as if it was written to us for them, and it's wrong. We have to read it because it was written to them, but for us as well. So we can extrapolate meaning out of it. We can take, but we got to read it in its original context first. There was another. That's a great question, by the way, because it's Hosea 4:6 is one of those things that people like to quote, but they miss the meaning. Because they do just the one verse. It's like if you read the entire context in that chapter, it's clear, and particularly when you get into the Hebrew, it's very, very clear that it's not just, oh, you didn't know something. It's you took the truth and you rejected it, and that's why you're suffering. Gene Hudson, I have a question mark. I'm assuming that means question. That's how I'm going to interpret that. You were told by a woman that all women should wear head coverings when they go to service and pray. That's in the Bible. Are women supposed to cover their heads and pray or worship? Okay. So this comes out of Paul's writings. I cannot remember exactly which one it is, and he talks about the head coverings. The problem is this goes back to reading it as to what I was just saying, reading it as if it was written to us, not for us. And the difference there is we have a different cultural understanding, and there are presuppositions that we have that they didn't have, and they have different presuppositions, and they have different things in their head than we do. The number, and this is why I'm really looking forward to Nathan's to having Nathan on. I think it's next Saturday. Hold on, let me check my calendar. I think it's next Saturday. If I can, if my phone would move faster. There we are. Calendar. Yeah, next Saturday afternoon. Should be around. I think I need to push it to 2 o'clock. But yeah, so Saturday afternoon, next Saturday, we're going to talk to Nathan about the Apocrypha. And the thing that we tend to, because we let's be honest, we are not a culture that reads the Bible the way it's supposed to be read anyway. So we really don't focus on the Old Testament. Secondly, we don't, as Protestants, we don't read the Apocrypha. We sure as the world aren't reading the Book of Enoch. So we don't have those things already in our head. The other problem is we're reading in English. And unfortunately, no translation is running around trying to make the grammatical connections that you would get if you were particularly if you were reading the New Testament, if you were a Greek-speaking Jew who read the Septuagint. Like, you would make connections we don't make here. So that's sort of that's a thing. Because, and the reason for that is we try and translate from the Hebrew for the Old Testament. And then we're translating from Greek, by and large, for the New Testament. Well, the problem is, if you're a Greek-speaking Jew who's reading the epistles and who's reading the Gospels, you recognize certain words that were used in the Septuagint. Like, they're pulling from that to make that connection, so we miss it entirely. So these are all things. So going back to the head coverings, right? The problem is that entire section is more about its modesty. What was considered modest in their culture, right? That's really what this is about. Because again, men don't wear head coverings anymore. You know, the conservative and Orthodox and Hasidic Jews will wear hats. They'll wear the kippah, whatever, the little skull cap things. You know, they'll wear them as their head covering for God. That's just not something we do. It really is a cultural thing. The broader point that Paul is making in his writing, that talks about head coverings, is just about modesty. That's all it's really about. And it's sort of the difference of, like, are you dressing to be seen, or are you being modest? That's really what that was about. Because for in Paul's day, a woman without a head covering was basically saying that she's a lot lizard. Like, I mean, just saying, it wasn't a good thing. But there's another context to that, right? And that he talks about it being for the angels, and this is where Enoch comes in. I mean, just very specifically. Because the idea is that because we never stop to think about, well, what is it that angels see when they watch us live our lives? These are just things that we don't necessarily always consider. And so he is basically saying 2 points. One, again, showing modesty, showing obedience to God is because we don't see God. Like, the angels live with God. They see God. We don't, right? We don't really see him in the physical. We don't talk to him face to face the way they do. So when we follow, again, the idea here is more about modesty. It's about clothing yourself in righteousness. That's really the point of that particular verse. That's for their behalf. However, the other part, and I do think we can't remove this, is that he is very much has the book of Enoch in his brain, and the readers would have had it in their brain when he says it's for the angels, because they remember that the angels were, that there were angels that did fall. The 200 watchers, they made a decision based off of the beauty of women. Um, and so I think that's part of this whole other thing, and I think that's very much in his head. So does that mean that women today have to wear head coverings? No, that's not the context. The context is about modesty, because again, those were cultural rules back in the day. Those were cultural norms. Those norms don't apply to us, as we're not Jewish. We just aren't. Are we part of true Israel? Yes, from a, again, the salvation standpoint. But we're not Jews. We don't live under that same. Uh, we don't live under that same covenant, right? So that's a better thing. A better way of looking at that is, we have to realize that there are, most of us are Gentiles. We at best live under the Noahide laws, on the Noahidic laws, versus any of the others, right? So that's it. Long way around the bend to say, no, you don't need to wear a head covering. But you know what? If you want to wear a head covering, if it makes you feel better, I'm all for it. Like, that's cool. It's not what I do, but it's groovy. Um, Again, I got friends who like to pull out break out a talith, and I'm like, I mean, that's fine. It's not, again, we're not Jewish, so I don't know that necessarily it doesn't apply to us, but I get it. It's groovy, you know. CJ. Oh, I'm glad to have a question from you, CJ. What do we consider true witnessing? While in college, I'd see people call out and insult people saying they're going to hell. You're sure this isn't the way to lead others to Christ? So here's the thing. I don't know that there's just one way. What I mean is, of witnessing. For, you're right. For that's not my style. I'm not a fan of it, but it does work for some people. So I think the question for me, true witnessing, is being willing to speak when you are called upon to speak. It is to say the things the Holy Spirit has given you to say at the time that He has given you to say it. That's true witnessing. I think the biggest problem isn't what people say, it's that they refuse to say it when it's time to talk. Again, I'm not a fan of that kind of witnessing. I am not a fan of people who go out and sort of being overly provocative. That's just not who I am. I don't think it's the best way to handle things. In the same way, though, I can't say that people haven't been saved by it, because I know that they have. And sometimes, and this is the other thing, is sometimes that shock stuff is what breaks up the soil that allows it to be softened for someone else to come and plant a different seed, right? To plant that seed that eventually sprouts and becomes salvation. So I tend to be of the opinion, I won't do it. It's not who I am. I don't believe that it's the best way of doing it, but I'm also not going to condemn someone so long as they stay within certain reasonable, I mean, just sort of objectively reasonable lines, right? I don't think you should ever assault someone. I don't think you should stand in people's way, per se. But being aggressive works from time to time. I just say, live as you're called. You're probably like me. You think that's not how you want to roll. I don't think it's necessarily how Jesus rolled. I try just to be like him as much as I can. So again, I'm not trying to dodge the question. It's more of a, again, what is true witnessing? It's speaking what the Spirit has given you to say when He's given you to say it. I think the problem is you can use all of the best words in the best tone and make the best form, but if it's not what the Holy Spirit really wanted you to say at that time or to speak at that time, it's not going to mean anything. For me, true witnessing is doing what the Holy Spirit is guiding you to do at the time that you are supposed to do it. That's it. The method, because guess what? Maybe the method is screaming at somebody. Sometimes you got to yell at, I've known my fair share of alcoholics and drug addicts. Sometimes you got to get aggressive. But by and large, would I say, if I were to look around and see someone, being more provocative than I would I be like, that's my favorite thing in the world? Nope. but I'm also not going to say that they're necessarily wrong. I think this is one of those things where it's often very easy for us to forget that just because something doesn't look the way we want it to look, that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it different. Um, I do think there are objective standards, though. Again, if they're swearing, if they're being overly belligerent or violent, I think that's completely uncalled for and definitely not in the spirit that we are supposed to minister to people. Absolutely not. But again, someone saying, "Hey," again, what is one of the most powerful speeches or sermons ever given in America is sinners in the hand of an angry God. People fell out of their, like, if you read it, it seems kind of mild. Well, not really. I mean, if you were to read it, like, you would think this, like, the guy who was giving, he was not impassioned. He was a very calm, with a very mild demeanor, but people fell out of pews, crying. And I mean, he brought a lot of people to God by with that by just not sugarcoating things. So just saying. So okay, so Jean had a great response in that, she says, CJ never understood that. I always thought you shared God's love and taught them with love to come to God. Well, again, let's remember, no one comes through God and save through the Father, or to the Father save through the Son. It is not us who brings anyone. We're just witnesses. It is the Holy Spirit that brings somebody. We witness, we minister, and again, I would agree, everything in love. However, sometimes, like I said, we've all dealt, if you haven't had to deal with an alcoholic or a drug addict, then I'm glad you haven't had to go through that. But sometimes you can't be nice. And there are times when being nice is actually the worst thing you could do. In fact, it's sort of a conversation I'm having with my daughter during the whole COVID thing. It's like, because she's a teenager, she's like, well, I just don't want people to think I'm being rude or what, by not wearing a mask or doing whatever, it is. And I'm like, here's the problem. Being nice is not a virtue. It's good, it's civil, but being nice or being considered nice, that's probably another way of saying it. It's not a high moral virtue. And we've made it a virtue in this nation. We've made being nice one of the we've made it as if that's this high moral virtue that we have to live up to, in that it's supreme on all other virtues, and it's not. Being nice is more of a cultural thing. And we need to recognize that sometimes, being nice in its way we've structured it, being nice means not offending somebody. Well, the gospel is offensive in and of itself. Always has been, always will be. So if the line of, well, I need to be nice means I can't be offensive, that means you can't preach the truth, because the truth will always be offensive. So these are delicate matters. The question is, what is the spirit? Like I said, I'm not a big fan of people who do the you're going to go to hell. That's not who I am. That's not how I roll. But I know people for whom that's worked, or at the very least, it got them thinking about things. So I won't necessarily condemn that either. It's just not how I roll. And at least up until so far as I've had this conversation, I have yet to be given by the Holy Spirit to do that. But I'll never say that he won't, because the Holy Spirit sometimes also has a sense of humor. Oh, howdy, Barry. Yes, Mr. Dunkel, they are. And everyone was saying howdy. So we'll go back up. So CJ, I really hope that made sense to you. Not a, I just, like I said, I'm not trying to talk around anything, just saying what I think. So I hope that was helpful. Everyone said, "Oh, you got a telly. Good for you." I've like I said, there was a time where I really thought about getting one. I still want to get a shofar. I really do. At the moment, I just don't have any place to. Well, I don't have a place for the things I got, much less a real shofar. I do have friends though who have goats and sheep. because the right ones are the big ones, but I'm thinking maybe I can get one of their horns and make my own. I'm gonna think about that. Okay, Jason, why do you think the Lord put the Watchers down in relative terms fast, but left Satan to do and go as far as he can? Does it have something to do with having does that have to do with having deed through Adam? Okay. And Genie, okay, that's a great response. I'll talk to that here. So actually, let me hit up Gene since it was just of what we were talking about. So hellfire and brimstone preaching is a form of tough love. Yes, it absolutely is. Like, never ever think that it can't be out of tough love. We have to, because Jesus himself said, we played the lute and you did not dance. We played the dirge and you did not mourn. You give both sides of that coin. Some people are going to come to Christ because they hear the call, and others are going to be scared out of hell. That's neither is better than the other. They're just what it takes to get to that person. I am one who doesn't. I actually like some good old-fashioned hellfire and brimstone. Now, people on the street, I can see that being a thing. Like that's not necessarily something that, again, like that what I would do, but I will never ever condemn someone for preaching hell. Jesus preached more about hell than he did heaven. Never forget that. The Bible has far more to say about hell than it does heaven. Because at the end of the day, most people are going to respond to pain more than opportunity. It's just who we are as carbon-based mammalian life forms, right? It's not the love of God that brings a lot of people. It's fear of hell. I'm of the opinion whatever it takes is what it takes. Everyone's different. So yes, hellfire and brimstone is a form of tough love, and never doubt for a moment that you're being loving if you have to bring a little hellfire and brimstone. Again, same way, drug addict, alcoholic. Sometimes you got to smack them around a bit, not the way you pay for. Sometimes you got to smack them around a little bit with because you do need to love them. The idea of setting someone out for sinfulness, right? What is he saying? It's like when Paul's like, no, you make them leave. You hand them over to Satan. What are you doing? You want them to suffer the wrath and the pain of being unprotected by the church. That's the entire point. You want them to feel the pain and wrath and suffering of sinfulness so that they will return to the church. Same idea. So back to Chadow's question. So why did he put the Watchers down first? And relative, from a relative perspective, 500 years, but quickly, while Satan's still running around. Okay, great question. I love the fact that y'all asked the easy ones. But let me say it this way. Enoch makes it very, very clear. The book of Enoch makes it very, very clear that the reason the Watchers were being imprisoned was A, creating the Nephilim, and B, running things. They made themselves kings and gods. They set up rulership. Essentially, they're being punished for crimes against humanity, where Satan is basically like, there's a line, and in fact, there are other texts that makes it clear that the angels maybe initially weren't, the Watchers may not initially have wanted to do evil. That they were like, no, in fact, we'll go down there and some texts have it saying like, we're gonna go down there and minister to them, and it'll be even better because we'll be there physically. And God's like, that's a bad idea, guys. He's like, I'm not gonna micromanage y'all, but y'all be careful with this because it's a good way to lose your way. But they go and they lose their way and they create the Nephilim. They make themselves god kings, and they allow their children to participate in cannibalism, eating humans, like just creating bloodshed. They taught us sinful behaviors. So it was that they pole vaulted over a line, whereas Satan didn't. Now, that being said, it is a point of contention, and this is something that I've wrestled with, and so I've wrestled with this idea, and I've mentioned this in the past, that Azazel may actually be Satan. And I was glad to hear that from even Michael Heiser. By the way, that just reminds me, Michael Heiser. It's been announced that he has pancreatic cancer, so that's someone else we need to pray for. The last I heard, they don't know if it had spread to his other organs yet, but he has been diagnosed as having pancreatic cancer, and they're going to work with him as far as treatments go. So we got to keep him in prayer on that one. But back to the original point, he had mentioned. I was listening to a teaching he was giving, that in Second Temple history, the Second Temple period, they did consider Azazel to be the Satan, that was his name, that was who he was. So I'm not going to say he is, right? I think maybe he's a type of Satan. And that's sort of where I've settled on, is for now I think there's actually maybe like 2 or 3 Satans. Because Satan just means adversary. So so just to make this even less clear, Satan that appears in Job is probably not the Satan that appears to Jesus in Matthew. And he may or may not be the same Satan we see in Revelation. So it's entirely possible that there are multiple Satans. There's the Satan, right? And the problem is, since all sinfulness is sort of attributed to him, we have types of Satan. And Azazel may just be one of them. But going back to that point, if Azazel is truly Satan, like the Satan, then he got put down with the rest of the Watchers. If he's not the Satan, but a form of Satan, and the Satan is still free, then it's, and again, the ultimate reason is because the Watchers, they stepped over a line. They rejected their natural place. Because if the Satan is still where he's supposed to be, then there's no legal reason for God to imprison him. God is a God of law. It just means that he's the smart criminal he's the one who runs for Congress. You know, it's like, sure, I could break into your home, steal your money, beat you up, and then I can go to jail. Or I can go to Congress and just tax the crap out of you and take the money through bribery and money launder it through super PACs, right? If Azazel and Satan are 2 different people, then Azazel's the criminal and Satan's the congressman or senator or president. Just saying. So I hope that was helpful. Cindy. Oh, hi, Cindy Finn. It says your grandkid's dad said that the Lutheran Church is not Christian. Well, so here's the thing: the Lutheran Church is absolutely a church of is definitely a Protestant Christian church. Now, what I will say, and this is where I differ from a lot of people, I don't, people say, well, the Catholic Church isn't a Christian church. It is a Christian church. I don't agree with its hierarchy. I actually don't agree with some of the Lutheran Church's hierarchy as well. But that doesn't make them not Christian. But then let's take this one step further. It doesn't matter necessarily that it's Catholic or Lutheran or Presbyterian or non-denominational, which is me, Southern Baptist, Mennonite, Free Will Baptist, missionary. It doesn't. None of those. The labels don't matter. The question is, do you have a relationship with Christ? Do you depend on him solely for your salvation? That is the question. I think we find Christians in all of these denominations. Again, you have to be a part of a Christian denomination. Yes. No, I do not consider just as an aside, the Mormon Church, I do not consider it to be a Christian denomination. It's clearly not. You have to be part of that sort of that Orthodox Christian, because right now we're seeing the evolution of the progressive Christian. I don't think that's Christian at all. In fact, it's, from what we're seeing coming out of a lot of these pastors, it ain't Christian even in name. But that's a whole different kettle of fish. So there is sort of a Christian orthodoxy, and there are, and every denomination is just looking at it from a slightly different perspective. That's why I'm non-denominational. I think a lot of denominations have very, very valid points. The problem is each denomination picks a point and then runs with it instead of saying, okay, so here's a valid point. Let's all work it out. Again, Paul, working out, you have to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. So is the Lutheran Church a Christian church? Absolutely. Just like the Mennonites, just like the Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, the Coptics, just like the Catholics, just like the non-denominational, just like the Southern Baptists, just like you name them. They're all Christian denominations. The question is, are you a Christian? Because being, just being in a church doesn't make you a Christian. Again, I'm a Texan. We have an old saying. You put your boots in the oven, they don't make them biscuits. And I think every Southerner has that saying. But the point is, some of the wickedest people I've ever met are people who went to church every Sunday. If God showed up one day and it's like, there's a comic called 100 Bullets, and it's an interesting story. It went for 100 issues, and there's this larger subplot. But the premise is that there are people who work sort of like above the government, like the elite kind of thing, and and one guy works for them, but he goes out and hands a briefcase to people that he chooses randomly, that he's choosing to to do certain things. But he hands them this briefcase, and it's got a gun with 100 rounds of ammunition. He goes, anyone you kill with this gun and these bullets, it'll never touch you. It doesn't matter who sees you, where it's done, when it's done. This gun, these bullets, it goes away. If God would ever give me that, I think of all the people in the world that I think that need to be taken out. Like, I'm just like, the world would be a much better place if these people didn't exist. Half of them went to a church, and were seen very prominently as good, upstanding Christians, when deep down, when you know what's really going on, they're monsters. So being in a church is irrelevant. Again, boots plus oven does not make biscuits. Unrepentant sinner plus church does not make Christian. It is about your relationship with Christ and nothing else. Nick from that other show, good friend of mine, Catholic. He's a terrible Catholic. I'm like, you're a better Baptist than you are a Catholic, but that's fine. He's a Christian. He's a Christian brother. But again, like I said, he's actually a terrible Catholic. He would make a better Southern Baptist than a Catholic. But he won't, he just can't get in his head to make that step. He still is in the Catholic Church, and that's fine. But the point is, it's about your relationship with Christ that matters. There are sinful people in every church, and there are saved people in every church. Again, Orthodox mainline Christianity, not progressive Christianity. Like I said, I'm sorry, progressive Christianity is not. It's as much of a cult as Mormonism, straight up. And there are Mormons who are not going to like me saying that, but I'm sorry, that's what it is. So I hope that, Cindy, I hope that helps. Oh, hey, Daniela. Unfortunately, it jumps, so I have to kind of look around and see where I'm at. Yes, Daniela, this is where the party is at. Man, so the problem is it just jumps, and I'm like, well, now I gotta just kind of scroll through and see who's saying what. Okay, yeah, okay, there we are. Good. And yep. Yep, Mr. D Knuckle, completely. Jesus boat. Okay, let me write that down real quick. I'm assuming JesusBoat.com, but Boat. I'm the only one who's going to get that joke. Okay. Oh, okay. On spiritual gifts, are they relevant today, and how do we pursue them as mentioned in 1 Corinthians? Okay. Yes, I do believe spiritual gifts are. I'm not a cessationist. That having been said, I also don't necessarily think that what we see, like say in the broader charismatic church, is the proper operation of them. The spiritual gifts are given by the Holy Spirit. In fact, let me say this: most of the time that I've heard the most, where it looks like it is the spiritual gifts are operating, are in like missionaries. Like they're out there, these untouched tribes. They're talking, and they all start. They have the speaking in tongues, which is actually another language, right? Like that's so. Let me. Okay, I do have friends who do the prayer language thing. I don't. I've been prayed over. I just, that's not my thing. But we have in Scripture, every time we see the gift of tongues being used, it is literally being used in the form of people are speaking one language and they're hearing another. I have plenty of stories like that. One gentleman was on a flight. I want to say going to Japan. I may be wrong on that. But he sits next to this gentleman who's going home. They have this amazing conversation the entire way. He becomes a Christian by the end of it, right? And as they're departing, the gentleman looks at him and says, "How did you learn perfect?" Again, I think it's Japanese. "How did you learn perfect Japanese?" In which the guy just looks at him and goes, "I don't speak Japanese." There are plenty of stories like that. That is what I think of. So again, I think spiritual gifts are for today. I think the problem is many churches have built a wrong theology around them. The spiritual gifts are given to specific people for specific times to accomplish a specific goal. Now, like I said, I think all Christians are capable of them. Again, it's the Holy Spirit working. So how do we pursue them? We pursue them by getting closer to God and pursuing the Holy Spirit. That's how we gain them, because what will happen is Jesus will then lead you through the Holy Spirit to be in a situation to need them. And you'll be chosen to do so. The problem is, I think that people are seeking the gifts as if the gifts themselves are the goal, and they're not. They're a tool to achieve a goal. To obtain them, we have to be in a situation to need them, because the Holy Spirit put us in a place to need them. I hope that makes sense. Jumped again. Hey, Brunson. Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Satan is in the church. So here's the thing. Cheese freak ginger snap. It's okay. I will. You just write on a chalkboard 100 times. I will not be late to Saturday Hangout again. 100 times. So the question of Cindy says that her pastor says the Satan is in the church. I'm going to quickly for just this conversation draw a line. There's two. Church can mean two things, right? That's sort of the problem. There is the actual spiritual body of Christ. The Satan can't get in there. But if by church, I think most of us use the word church this way, what we mean is the human organization, right? The actual physical churches with their actual physical humans who are leading things. Yes, Satan is in that system. Absolutely. It's all over the place. This is why you have the scandals that you have, is that there are, I'm going to say this very delicately, because Christianity doesn't cost you anything in our modern world like it used to, right? there isn't sort of a natural filter for people who are of ill temper and or ill intent. Back in the day, Christianity cost you your life, and in certain nations, it still will cost you your life. You can lose everything. You can get beheaded. You can be imprisoned. Your family can get shot. Your house burned down. Throughout time, and in many places around the world, even today, Christianity costs you something. It doesn't cost you anything here, at least not yet. Not really. So because of that, in fact, in many cases, it's a resume enhancer. Deacon of a church, pastor. Look at this man. He's a pastor of a church. He's been to seminary. He's a good, upstanding, moral character. Just saying, it's a good reason to, for some people who are of ill intent, or people who just want to be about them. It's not a bad place to hide. So I would agree. Satan is in the church system run by humans, because, and one of the reasons for it is because there's sort of no natural filter, right? If getting beheaded was a real possibility for being a Christian in America or Europe, Australia, a few other places, if you wouldn't have the problem, you wouldn't need to, because Satan would have power on the outside. But since that power doesn't exist yet, he's been able to walk into the church through people who are not called by God, who have ill intent. And maybe sometimes that ill intent isn't even necessarily, mustache twirling, they're not, Dick Dastardly trying to tie Penelope Pitstop onto the tracks, right? That's not the kind of ill intent I'm talking about. The ill intent is pride. It's, I'm going to go and do this super cool thing for God, and God's going to love it, and look how awesome I'm going to be. Or maybe they're people who they had skills, they grew up in the church, they had some talent, and everyone was like, this is what you got to do, it's what you got to do. And so they just, instead of ever finding out what it was God called them to do, they didn't really have a real relationship with God. They had their father's relationship with God. They had their mother's relationship with God. They just did what people told them to do. They just sort of followed what everyone else said to do. And so they wound up in the wrong place doing the wrong thing. And that leads to corruption. It's one of the hardest truths I've had to learn is, just because you want to do something for God doesn't mean he wants you to do it. I mean, just think that through. Look at that scripture. It's about the heart. You're like, well, I'm going to do this for God. God doesn't need you to do anything for him. He wants to work through you. You are to live as you are called. The problem is, a lot of people live as their father called them, or as their mother called them, or as society called them, not what God called them to do. And that's a different thing altogether. And when you're doing something for the praise of men, when you're doing something for the praise of society, when you're doing something to be seen as big and wonderful and powerful and cool and awesome, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons, and it corrupts you on the inside, no matter how good you think you're doing. And the problem is, it just takes that little crack, just a little one. That's all the room Satan needs to turn you into something very ugly. Oh, it jumped again. More than one do. Mr. D. Knuckle, yes. So this goes back to the idea of speaking in tongues, right? Mr. D. Knuckle says, more than one TV mega church pastor has spoken in tongues, and other non-English speakers hear blasphemy. This is entirely true. So just be careful. So here's my thing, right? When you see so a lot of what people in the monitors like to say, well, look, this must be an expression of the, of spiritual gifts. It's like, if you see it happening in witches and other religions, it probably ain't what you think it is. Now, it doesn't mean it's not supernatural. I'll say that. It just may not be what we think it is. Just Again, always use wisdom. Shadow, Jason, maybe politically conspiratorial. I like it already, but definitely the elephant in the room. But is this vaccine causing major rifts in our society? Man, I want to discuss. Okay, well, so here's the problem: YouTube algorithms. Here's what I will say. Regardless of anything to do with the vaccine or not, there is absolutely a an authoritarian movement. The problem is it's the vaccine is simply the most recent thing. Again, let me say this: if you're over 65, really over 45, and or if you have uh, you know comorbidities, weakened immune system, again, talk to your doctor. Period. In the story, always talk to your doctor. In fact, before all this, everyone seems to forget the CDC guidelines were considered like this is sort of a good thing to think about, but it was the doctor, your doctor, the people who knew you, your medical history. They're the ones who had the say. You were to listen to them, not anyone else, because you can't. In a country of 320, again, just the United States, over 320 million people, no one thing will work for everyone. Everyone has different vulnerabilities. Everyone has a different immune system. There are plenty of reasons why you wouldn't want to take a vaccine, and not just this one. Anyone. Some people they can't take them. Some people it makes perfect sense. Talk to your doctor, people who actually know you, not no one on the internet, no one on television. No one should tell you what to take, ever, under any circumstances. That's between you and your medical professional. Period. In the story. But given the numbers, who are the most vulnerable, I'm all for it. Take it. I'm not an anti-vaxxer in any way. That having been said, I think the idea of forcing people to take this vaccine or any vaccine without consent is immoral. That's a degree of authoritarian control I find very, very troubling, because at the end of the day, people who want power, there's always an excuse. There's always a disease, there's always some problem, there's always a terrorist, there's always something to base that on, to use as your excuse. In fact, for those, again, I hate when you jump to World War II, you've basically, but the thing is, we do have to look at it. Everyone seems to forget one of the original things that they were used to try and pull out or mark the Jewish people wasn't just because they were Jewish, it was because the government said that they had typhus. That because they lived in these tight-knit communities, typhus was likely to spread, and so for Germans to actually stay away from the German Jews that was the first reason they wore those yellow badges, the star, was to identify them because of a typhus outbreak. So, do I think that's what's happening here? Again, I think the virus is a real virus, but it's also clear it's basically just a bad flu virus. It's just more communicable. That's all it is. We have overreacted, and that's the problem. It's the reaction to it. This goes back to sort of to Chadow's original question. My people perish for a lack of wisdom or lack of knowledge. It isn't that they don't have it; it's they've rejected it. There's a lot of people in our culture who's rejected wisdom, who have rejected practicality, who've rejected truth, who've rejected God, and in doing so, it's going to lead you to make bad decisions. And sometimes it also leads you to become an authoritarian. And authoritarianism is not something that is. Again, I go back to, of course, Satan's in the church system. Why do you think so many authoritarians end up in the church? God's about freedom. He's about liberty, meaning you have the ability to pursue what God has called you to do. Authoritarians want you to do what they want you to do. And there's a good reason why the authoritarians show up in the church an awful lot. They like that power that they get because people are far too hesitant to call them out on their BS. Church, politics, doesn't matter. We have to stand with God and for God in all wisdom, and take everything as it comes, and recognize that sinful human nature leans towards totalitarianism, towards authoritarianism. And that desire that is innate in all human hearts, this desire for power, that is to be fought in all cases. Not doing something stupid, but recognizing that that authoritarian leaning is there. And when it pops up, it has to be opposed, because if you don't, things get ugly real fast. Everyone points to World War II, but let's look at World War I. Let's look at the Civil War, slavery, uh, the Spanish Inquisition. I mean, show me a time period in human history where the conquistadors, the Muslims in the invasion of Europe that led to the Crusades, uh, Islam itself, modern or ancient. Let's look at the uh, again. The Japanese wiped out the Ainu when the Asiatics came over to Japan. It doesn't matter where or when you look. The human need for authoritarian control exists. And the problem with authoritarian control is it is always the most brutal and least deserving people who take that power every single time. Chato on is this being a precursor? I think it is it's one of many precursors. This is not a new thing. Rugerage. Yes. Rugerage, exactly. Yes. This is just one more of 100 different things. The social security numbers, credit cards, you name it, right? Social media. It's the creation of the infrastructure. It's the creation of these ideas. And here's the worst part of all of it, right? So congested today. Here's the worst part of all of it. And again, let's just put this out there, because again, there's actually 3 marks of the beast. Everyone seems to forget, but there's 3. But if the mark of the beast was a computer chip implanted in the skin. Let's just work with that particular theory. Everyone seems to like that theory. Let's use it. Okay. So you have a credit or a microchip embedded in the skin that gives a biometric reading. So if you want to buy, sell, do whatever, right? It's all done through that chip to identify you. Here's the worst part of all of it. That's a great idea. Stop thinking about it. Voting, well, we know who you are. We know where you live. Your medical history, okay, great. We know your medical history. We know if you have a disease. We know if you have an allergy to something. There's no question about that. It makes most theft impossible. It makes illegal drug deals impossible. Kidnapping becomes virtually impossible, because we would always have, right, a way of tracking everyone. So even if someone could get away with murder or murdered somebody or kidnapped somebody, we could track them down real fast, maybe saving the child, maybe saving the woman who was kidnapped, or at least catching the murderers. We would actually know the person who did the murdering was the murderer, because we could say, well, at the time of this person's death, this chip was right here. This chip belongs to this person, therefore, they're the murderer. Everyone who goes to jail actually committed the crime, and you would know with 100% certainty they committed the crime. We would know where everybody was, when they were. Objectively speaking, that's a great idea. It solves so many problems. The problem is 2 things. One, the person who's going to have control over it. That's the problem. Every good idea is irrelevant. Doesn't matter how good the tool is, how wonderful the technology is, the person using it is the problem. Secondly, it is very clear that from scriptural, from not just the Book of Revelation, but from other resources, that this mark is a indication of political and religious connection. See, that's the thing that we tend to miss. We're working from the idea that it's a conspiracy, that this mark is going to be sneaky somehow. I think it's going to be patently obvious that it's going to be, you are saying, I align myself with this political and spiritual religious ideology. Now, it'll be a universal ideology. Like I said, I do think it'll have something to do with ancient astronaut theory in a way to sort of combine everything. I do think Islam is going to play a huge part of it, but it's going to be about, it's a political and a religious demarcation. You are publicly saying this, and as much as I thought this is going to be something you wouldn't see, I think it's going to be something very visible. I think it's going to end up being, it'll be a fashion statement. It's, do you have your mark? And you're going to have like Megan Fox and on her forehead, or the hand and whatever. Like, you're going to have that. It's going to be visible. It's going to be something that you can see. I think I'm even, don't get me wrong, I think the computer chip is probably the best option for at least one of them. There are three. Remember, there's the mark, the name and number of the beast, and the other one I forget off the top of my head. Or maybe it's the name and then the number of the beast. Either way, there's three types of mark. And those may actually be like just big headings, right? There may be sub marks underneath. But however it manifests, I think it's going to be visible. In fact, I think in most cases it would be visible. I think that's the entire point. I don't think it's going to be anything as, I don't think it's going to be, let me rephrase this. I don't think it's going to present itself as something else. Like, okay, so your question, she's really, is it a vaccine passport? I don't think it's going to be that at all. Is it a precursor? Well, to a point, but we've already had vaccine, things for a while. There are countries you can't enter without having some vaccines. Again, I don't think it's going to be sneaky, but do I think is it setting up a precedent? Yeah, it is. Right? It is absolutely, and this video has been entirely flagged, by the way, because we've mentioned vaccines, passports, and Nazis. So it's official. We're getting flagged. That's cool. That's how we roll. I assure you, there will not be any doubt when they start rounding up Christians. They're not gonna be like, well, maybe you didn't. Well, maybe this guy just didn't really. Oh, well, no, never mind. We have all of this evidence. You are clearly a Christian. You can go be beheaded now. Now I'll be like, I told you. Like, there's no getting out of this one. But my bigger point is, it's not going to be something that's snuck into something else, right? It is going to be very visible. It's going to, and you are going to know pretty quick. In fact, I'm going to take it one step further. We don't see the mark until at least 3.5 years in. Like, I don't think we see it before the actual Antichrist comes to power. I think we're going to have I think we're going to be looking at the event. I used to say war. I don't know that it's a war anymore. But the event that kills 1/3 of humanity, I think that's what allows him to come into true power. Again, 3.5 years in, I think once he comes to true power, those final 42 weeks, that's when it comes out. And here's the thing, right? It's, the barcode is like, well, the barcodes are too common. It could, again, there's three kinds. It could be that there's a microchip, there's a barcode, could be that there's just a symbol, right? We don't know what it's going to end up being. Like I said, it looks like there's going to be three, maybe even those are just like the top, and there's subgroups, right? Subheadings. We don't know. What we do know is I don't think it's going to be sneaky. I don't think it's going to be something that everyone's like, What? What? Like, you're not going to wake, like, people aren't going to be waking up being like, well, what just happened? Why do I have this thing? It's not going to be like, hey, we're going to give you a vaccine, and then poof, there's a microchip, and now you've got the mark of the beast. Ha ha, you're going to hell. That's not what's happening. You're going to know, you're going to make the choice, and it'll be very public. Cindy Finn, I'm irreverent toward the worldview. Could you explain that? Or do you mean that you don't necessarily agree that the Antichrist will control the entire planet? Is that what you're saying? Because I actually agree with you. I think it's actually kind of clear from Daniel. He does not have control over the entire earth, like as a political ruler. Like, I don't think he's dictator of the earth. I don't think we see that in the book, particularly in the book of Daniel. But if you could clarify that, I'd appreciate that. A. Brunson, thank you for agreeing with me. Do we run out of questions? Have I caught up? Look at that. I think we're going to take a little break here. I'm just going to let my whistle here. Unfortunately, I have to end this a little early. My daughter, I have to go pick her up from a party at 8, but it's only like 10 minutes down the road, so I'll probably leave out at like 7:50. I should probably charge my phone, though. Yep, I was getting too low. Brenda Hawkins, please, just type in your question. You don't have to raise your hand around here. We're very informal. Please, I'm very interested. Cindy, okay, I see. In fact, I kind of agree with that. In fact, just to be very specific here, I think what we're going to see is the Antichrist will rule a very specific political kingdom, which is going to be a reunified Alexandrian empire, which is basically the Middle East over towards India, North Africa. I think that they'll also control Britain. It may be Britain and basically all of Europe, but definitely Britain. They'll be unified, at least there. Again, I don't know about classical Britain, if that includes France or the EU, but definitely England and definitely Turkey, the Middle East, and North Africa will be controlled by the Antichrist. But I do think that there will be an option for Muslims to join the caliphate, because there will be a reconstruction of the caliphate. And so since there'll be a reconstructed caliphate, any Muslim can then apply to be a part of that caliphate, and so I think one of the big treaties that's going to be made is we're going to end all of this terrorism by basically saying, here's a unified caliphate and an Islamic court. And so if you're a Muslim, like say in America or Europe or China or something, and you commit a crime, you can appeal to the Muslim court and say, I want to be judged by them. So that court system will be everywhere. So I think again, only my opinion. But that's how they get it. But yeah, I don't think the Antichrist actually has political control over the entire planet. I think he has political control only over his nation, and that he'll have broader control through this court system. A. Brunson just figured out the Boba Fett. So the Boba Fett so here's the thing. So he's Boba Fett in The Mandalorian. He's Jango Fett in episode 2. And he's the clones. Well, although it's a different. Actually, that's Steve Bradley Baker being the voices of the clones in the shows. Anyway, that's irrelevant. But yes, Aquaman's father is Boba Fett. He is Boba Fett. By the way, they changed the name of Slave One. Slave One is his ship. They removed it. It is now Fire Spray. That is the dumbest name ever. Like, Disney has ruined Star Wars. It really has. Okay, so CJ. Let me answer Brenda's question since she raised her hand first. Do you think this world is going to be doomed when all of this comes about? So here's the thing. That is a great question. And so here's the thing. What do you mean by world? And that's an important thing. We often assume, because of our modern language, world means the planet that we sit on, right? The problem is, scripturally, that's not really true. It's more about systems, right? It's more about the political function on the planet. Our planet will survive what occurs in the book of Revelation. The world that is destroyed is this world system that we currently live under. That's what's destroyed. Because Jesus comes and reigns for 1,000 years. This is a physical political kingdom that exists for 1,000 years. People will harvest, they will reap, people will live for centuries during this period. So the world, meaning the globe, yes, it is a globe. The globe that, again, Godzilla, who's hiding behind my book and lamp, proved that. I'll do a whole video for Siru, don't worry. But the globe that we're on, it'll be fine. It's going to suffer a lot, but it'll be fine. It is the world system that's being destroyed. In fact, this is the best way. In fact, when I explained this to a friend of mine years ago, he had a response. Actually, it was Nick. It was Nick I was talking to. And he's like, hold up. You mean this whole book of Revelation is really only about Jesus returning, destroying the political systems that lead us to war and kill each other and enslave each other and be terrible to one another, and it's replaced by Jesus, who's coming to bring justice and mercy and freedom? What's the problem? Like, this is the greatest thing ever. And that's the truth. The globe will survive this. The world system as it currently stands, the world of corruption, of political intrigue, of oppression, that goes away. On Sundays, we're talking about what does it mean to be the kingdom? That's the conversation we're having, right? Here's the thing. It is as what the thing we've already sort of discussed is the kingdom is not a metaphor. It is a real thing. It is a true political system. Jesus is coming to implement it. He's the one who implements it. We are extensions of that. But it is to overthrow the empires of this earth, the corruption, the evil. That goes away for 1,000 years. Now, at the end of that 1,000 years, we have the white throne judgment. The earth will be destroyed only to be remade, and for everything to move on, and going back to square one, where it was the Garden of Eden. We'll have New Jerusalem. We will have God there. The angels will be there. We will be there in a remade heaven, remade earth as one thing. So I hope that helps. CJ, casual conversation, asked him if he got the vaccine and was upset with him that he hadn't. Seems to be common thought, if you don't get the vaccine, you're the problem. Yeah, I think a lot of this is more, so all of this is really more, again, goes back to the idea of authoritarianism. This is about creating division. I think the way the politicians are handling this is about destroying unity, trust in one another. That's what the politicians are trying to do with it. Absolutely. We have several. Yeah. So, it jumped again. Oh, for the love of Pete! It just, when it jumps sometimes. Oh, hold on, my wife is calling me. She knows I'm doing. Oh, hold on, let me text her. So she knows I'm doing a show. So it's probably a thing. Let me text her real quick. It's terrible when you can't spell something. There we go. We'll see what she says. Feast of Corals. Okay, man. I hate when it jumps because I have to scroll all the way up, and I'm like, but these are great questions. There you go. Okay, so yeah, Gene. Unfortunately, again, the question that started off this episode, I think, you know, Chato, formerly Titan, um, had a great point. Again, the question of Hosea, my people will die for perish for lack of wisdom or lack of knowledge. I think that set the team. Oh, there she is. Hold on, my wife is here. I'm gonna have to put you on mute for just 2 seconds. Love you too. Apparently, I can't feed yucca to the dog. Apparently, yucca is poisonous. If you don't know what yucca is, it's a root. It's a replacement for basically potatoes. It's a lot tougher than potatoes. It has these stringy things in it. But my wife is allergic to potatoes, and she grew up in Colombia, so we get yucca. Come here, little dog. The world should see why I can't feed you yucca. Come here. Yeah, she doesn't like to be picked up and put on screen. Hello. Say hello to the nice people. Hello, nice people. See? Yeah. But we can't feed you yucca or onions. I know you keep asking me for my onions, and you can't have them. Not one of them. They're bad for you. Anyway, so this is Ellie, and she cannot have the yucca. Sorry, but you can't. I know. But you want to eat the yucca, don't you? She does. All right, you can go. You can go hang out with mommy. She has to go teach our future overlords in China. So. So where were we? There's a great question. I just went. Is there a feast that correlates to the end of days? In fact, there are several that correlate with the end of days. Um, the Feast of Trumpets, that is the rapture event. That's the resurrection. That's rapture. Same event, same thing. That's what that is. The Feast of Atonement, that is actually the Battle of Armageddon. The scapegoat, that is Satan being chained and thrown into the abyss for 1,000 years. The I always forget it. The Feast of Tabernacles, I forget, Sukkot, that's the word. That is Jesus setting up his millennial kingdom and ruling and reigning on earth for 1,000 years. All three of the fall feasts, there we go. All three of the fall feasts, they are all correlating with the end with it's not the end of the world, it's the end of this age. That's the way to think of it. End of this age. And we're actually going to do a review of all the feasts once we're done with the kingdom study. Yeah, there are. So I do think a lot of, again, the whole vaccine thing, the virus thing, all of that is cover story. It is an excuse to make people afraid. And when people become afraid, they ask for control. There's always an excuse for the authoritarians, and it is division that they want. And here's the thing: I don't blame the politicians; they're evil. I don't blame the media; they don't know anything. I blame the church because for the last 100 years, definitely, we have not stood for righteousness. We have not stood. We have not called politicians to account, and it got worse in the '60s because the church got bought out. If with the whole taxation thing, it's like, oh, if you want to be tax deductible, you can't talk about XYZ. We got bought. You in the whole contract, the things that you have to sign to be a 501c3. Guess what? So is Planned Parenthood. You go into contract, and for me, this is why I will never be tax deductible. And I know there are organizations like you have to be tax deductible to do that. That's separate from being a church, right? Specific like orphanages, things like that. I don't mind them being a 501c3 because they are doing work in the public. So they're more operating in a public square versus a church. A church is very, very different. That is supposed to be God on earth. That is the representation of Christ. That is the point of the church. They should not be a 501c3 under any circumstances, because here's why. Anyone who can tell you what not to say or can force you to say something, if they can tell you what not to say or they can force you to say something because otherwise you don't get your cash, they own you. If they own you, they're your head. If they're your head, Christ can't be the head of the church. I would argue the 501c3 system is the reason why the church is so weak today. The reason the church has been so ineffectual, been just, oh wow, I almost slipped on that one. I was about to work blue. Let's just leave it as weak, and we'll leave it there. The reason the church has been so ineffectual and useless as an organization, as sort of an organizational concept for the last century, and particularly right now, is because of the 501c3 system. Because pastors didn't call out politicians. They didn't say, you're evil, that's evil, this law is evil. They wouldn't call it out because they didn't want to lose their tax deductible statement. So even if they weren't a 501c3, if the 501c3 didn't make the government the head of the church instead of Christ, the fact is they cared more about mammon, the cash that was coming in, than they did speaking the truth. That's a very broad brush that I'm painting with. And so I understand. I have a lot of pastor friends. Again, I'm not calling any one person out. I'm calling out the system. If you feel, and I will say this, if you feel like that has painted you, then you need to get right with Christ. But yeah, just saying. Cheese Freak, I will not hate you for not seeing Star Wars. In fact, I recommend, if you would like to watch Star Wars, though, I recommend watching A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back. Then you jump back and watch Revenge of the Sith. Don't even bother with the first two. Then you can watch Return of the Jedi, at which point you can then go and watch the Rogue One and Han Solo movies, and you can watch The Mandalorian, and you can watch the Clone Wars television series. I do not recommend even watching the first two prequels or anything after Episode 7. Just don't. It's not worth it. It really isn't. Fire spray was the name of... Yeah. So yeah, but they're dropping the Slave One. They're dropping the name. It's a countdown. Yeah, we're on a countdown. And by the way, Brenda, you want to find out about the countdown? I have a book. Again, it's the tetralogy. It's all 4 books. The 2017 alignment. That's Revelation 12, baby, right there. Revelation 12. It tells you where we are. Now, it's not over until 2027, but the 2017 alignment that everyone was talking about 4 years ago now, that was Revelation 12. It's just not done until 2027. After that, I don't know when, but it's soon. So again, between 2027 and 2030 and 2033, that's when I expect this all to kick off. Just saying. So we are in the end times. We absolutely are. Now, the question is, how much time do we have left? I don't know. Oh, I hate it when it jumps like this. Overbuilt Automotive, welcome. Would you agree that, like Moses and Daniel, they operated in a world? Okay, so Chato, yes, I agree. God, the Holy Spirit, they will work through us, and they will keep us. Those of us who are in Christ, He will keep us, but we have to remain in Him first as well. We have to. The world, as we know, as we've been talking about in the entire concept of the Kingdom series, is that the world is run by and under control of the spirits from Deuteronomy 32, right? They are It is controlled by evil spirits, including Satan. We live in that system until such time as Christ comes. But those of us who remain in him, again, the branches who remain in the true vine, he will keep us through. He will see us through that. We don't need to worry individually. My condemnation is always for the structure, and not anyone in particular in it, but just the structure in the system. It's like either fix the system or get the heck out of the system. Those are your two options. I think we've seen which one I've chosen. But again, this right here, this little window that you're looking in, this can't be the end of your Christian walk. You've got to find other people. We have to. In fact, that's one of the things I'm trying to do right now. I need to have communion with other physical Christians. This little box here cannot be the end of our world. And every single one of y'all has the ability to go out there and if you're not going to a good church, if you're like, man, this church sucks, I need to get out, make your own, bring people into your home. If you're like, but I'm not a teacher, watch these videos, participate. Like, we can do this. We really can. But it's got to be every one of us out there in the field, talking to people, ministering to people, standing and saying the things that need to be said when they need to be said. That's what this is about. If I want to yep. Well, right now, as far as the Kingdom series, right now we're doing the Beatitudes. Well, not the Beatitudes. We're doing the Sermon on the Mount. So we just finished up the Beatitudes last week. This week, we're moving past where he says, "I did not," or we're in the section where he says, "I did not come to destroy the law, but to complete it." And we're in that section right now. So just read the Sermon on the Mount and you're caught up. Although it did, so the kingdom idea start off with going back to Nimrod, right? And saying, well, what is a kingdom? What is the idea of the kingdom? So, but yeah, if you want on Sundays, you want to catch up, just read the Sermon on the Mount. You'll be good to go. Let's see. Okay, I had to jump out. Old school. There we go. Okay. Shadow, I do homesteading videos and quilt. Gene, I love you. That's why I love you. And I can't quilt. I can't farm. Like, I kill plants. I think we've planted, like, I have my little, it's a little bit larger than a quarter acre that we're on. Of all the trees that I think we've had 5 or 6 trees that we've planted, 3 of them have survived at all. Like, at all. Although we had a lot of peaches and a lot of apples. So the peaches are done, the apples are still going, the pears are going. They're finally coming in, but yeah, I'm really hoping we see a lot of miracles like Elijah, because I'm not gonna be able to farm this one out. Oh, interesting, Overbuild. That's your birthday is in the Day of Atonement this year. That is interesting. Cindy, so again, back to, just if you want to read just the Sermon on the Mount, you'll be caught up, because the big premise was understanding what is the nature of a kingdom. Does anyone remember the lady who wanted God out of the school? Yeah. Gene, yeah, we have to learn from history. So the broader point here is, the woman who wanted, I forget her name, she got, again, prayers and pray. If there's one lesson we should learn over the last 40 years, right? And I think Rush was even talking about this towards the end of his life. He's like, we laughed at all these people for years, but look at where we are now. We were always told, do you really want to die on that hill? Do you really want to die on that hill? Is this really worth fighting over? The answer is yes. We have to realize the answer should always be yes, in the broader scope of things, right? Not necessarily individually, but in these bigger points. Please understand, it's never what they're talking about. Again, and I said this years ago to some friends of mine who were anti-vax, and I was like, look, I'm not anti-vax. I do think the anti-vax movement is kind of a psyop, I'll be honest, because they wanted to set up a situation. I think we're seeing it right now where I think they were trying to engineer a situation where there was an outbreak as a way of saying, see, we have to force vaccines. But once you've created precedent, you can go farther. Whatever the conversation is right here that we're having, the problem is we have always had this conversation. We've never realized the conversation was up here. That has been our problem, because we as the church have been under. We, instead of saying, okay, so here's the political structure, we're supposed to be over here looking down, not underneath, but here, it doesn't matter what side you're on, Democrat, Republican, you're still under it. Well, guess what? You're blind, and you're having their conversation. You're not having the real conversation. We need to have fought every hill and died on every hill, because the conversation was never what was here. It was always about this up here. It was always what was going to be 2 or 3 steps down. That's what the fight was over. These fights were never the fights that we were having, and we were never smart enough to figure it out. We have to have learned that by now. So Cheese Freak was on. Nice. I have not been to Israel. That is someplace I would like to go. Absolutely. Just haven't had a chance to. But the way I see it is, even if I don't get a chance to see it now, I'll see it in the future. We'll be spending a lot of time there in the future. So, okay, but I'll be honest, the one place I really want to go more than anything, and I would give just about anything to do it, is and again, the problem is you can't, because the Saudi Arabians won't let you. I want to go to Jabal al-Lawz. I want to spend real time at Jabal al-Lawz and explore the crap out of that. Because I do think that is the real Mount Sinai. I have for a while. There's a video, you can watch it for free if you have Amazon Prime. It's called The Real Mount Sinai. It's the first people to really go out there and do some exploring of it. Man, I do think Jabal al-Lawz is absolutely Mount Sinai. That's a different thing. Okay. Topic for a fast-paced fiction novel or graphic novel. Okay, Shadow, that's a great question. Actually, I have 2 that I'm thinking of. I'm trying to figure out how to do it. The first one is, and the thing is, it may actually be the same title either way. The first one is sort of the idea that all cryptids are, or that most cryptids that people think of, are actually supernatural beings, but they're sort of the earthly manifestations of them. And that the hero basically has the sword from Eden, right? And that by possessing it, it allows him to fight and to actually see the spiritual world. So it would be a way of exploring the supernatural world and how it actually interacts with our own. And so he's fighting the creatures that go rogue, like the ones that cross that line. That's what he's fighting. Of course, each one is an exploration of how the supernatural works, how susceptible people are to things. That was the first thought. The other one I thought might be too ambitious, but I do love the old Jack Kirby things, right? The Eternals, Jack Kirby's Fourth World, the old, the original version of Thor, where where it's these big space things, and the Fourth World stuff. I love the Jack Kirby run, Galactus, all of it. I kind of want to. One of the thoughts I had, I just don't know if I could pull it off, and I don't know if it would be accepted if I did. So everyone gets to say on this one if I should pursue the first one or the second one. The second one is this, and I might change the title to be Draconis Extinctor anyway. That's sort of my main thought for the title. It means Dragon Slayer, but hear me out. My working title for the second one is Christ Jesus, God Slayer. Playing off of the idea of, again, Deuteronomy 32 and Psalms 83 that we talked about, right? That's how he inherits the world, is by the death of these beings. So it's literally the story of Jesus from prehistory through today, but it's from the celestial level, right? Not us on earth. It's the heavenly places. It's the sort of, I never watched Game of Thrones because that always just seemed like nerd porn to me. But the same idea, right? Where it's like Game of Thrones from the celestial temples. And so everyone's decked out in like these Jack Kirby-esque, flamboyant, over the top. All the angels look weird. The spirits and they're arguing over the human souls, over nations. We get to see how the angels that were put over, or the spirits that were put over mankind, became corrupted. We get to see the demons, how they come out of Sheol to torment humans. We get to see all of it from that sort of celestial perspective, as sort of an answer. And of course, it ends with Jesus winning. Like that. Like that's the end. Like that's the end is him actually conquering and inheriting these things, and them being cast down and into hell, therefore death. So the thing is, I don't know if people would get what I was trying to necessarily do with that second one, whereas the first one might just be a little more accessible as a way of explaining and exploring true spirituality and true religion through a human vessel, from our perspective, but allows them to see the supernatural versus it being entirely from a supernatural perspective. I just don't know if people can handle that. So I'll let y'all. I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on that. Did you give a definitive thought answer on the prophecies about Trump? Yeah. So here's my definitive thought on that. I have no clue. I go back to what I have. I have always had a wait and see perspective on modern prophecies. I allowed myself optimism, far too much optimism, for this last go round, which is not common to me. I'm not an optimistic person. I'm a realist. I'm not. It is what it is. But as far as the overall prophecies, I kind of go back to, this is why I'm a big fan of Jonathan Cahn, right? Jonathan Cahn and what's the other guy's name? There's the ice cream man, and now I want ice cream. They're driving by now. What is his name? Perry Stone. That's his name, Perry Stone. I tend to like them because they work very much the same way I have, which is going back to the old rabbinical ways of sort of seeing how God is speaking through his word, but through pattern, right? Humans, we do everything through pattern. That's how you see where you are. Prophetic time in prophetic time spaces, that seems to be the way to go. It has not failed yet. I'll say it that way. It takes a lot of discernment, it takes a lot of hard work, and unfortunately, it doesn't often give you the specificity that you want. But it does seem to be to indicate that we were moving beyond Trump, or that if Trump does return for a second tenure after Uncle Bad Touch is out, it would be a very different Trump. That seems to be what's indicated. But last time I was listening to Jonathan Cahn talking about, because he had connected him to Jehu, and the thing is, the end of Jehu's reign looks very, very much like what happens on January 6th. So it's entirely possible that Trump's just gone, or if he does return, because I will say this, Kim Clement. I was trying to remember his name the other day. Kim Clement. All he said was that this person that he was predicting, and he did believe it to be Trump at the end of his life. It was associated with gold, comes out of New York, has hot blood. That's Trump. He said that he'd have 2 terms, but he doesn't specifically say back to back. A lot of people did. I have problems with that. Like, again, if you make a claim, it better pan out, or you better give me good reasons. Like, you were talking out of turn or whatever. Fine. Again, I'm going back to my old wait and see for that kind of stuff, because too many people got too many things too wrong for me to be comfortable with them. So I kind of go back to, again, Barry Stone hasn't been wrong yet. And Khan hasn't been wrong yet. And again, because Khan and Stone both kind of do what I do, which is We look at we look at the patterns, we look at the feast dates, we look at the script. Like there's a sort of an old school rabbinical way of looking at this. It's playing it safe, but that's the kind of person I am. I'd rather play it safe, which is probably why I'm not going to do anything really big and flashy. I like to play it safe, so that's me. I know that's not overly helpful, but unfortunately, at the end of the day, I'm just not happy with the way a lot of people said things. Because a lot of these people are still like, yeah, it's going to be back to back. Absolutely. They also said things like Biden will never put his hand on that Bible. They're going to, like, I think too many people got caught up in Q. I've always thought that Q was a disinformation. It was a disinfo psyop just from the way things work. Everyone's like, but look at so many things that happened at the beginning. Well, that's how psyops work. You give enough information at the beginning that's accurate so that they believe you, and then you feed them the disinformation. So it's usually disinformation in ways that you can't say no to. So they're like, well, since he was right here, we'll just follow along. That's always what Q seemed to me. And again, this goes back to anyone who's studying, guys. If y'all are studying the Nephilim, if you're studying UFO research, please understand. I really hold all of them across the board. If it's, well, we have a military whistleblower or a whistleblower in the government, that should be your first red flag. Because even if they are being honest, it doesn't mean the government isn't using them for misinformation. Just saying. I love ginger snap cookies, just as an aside. Susan Robertson, then I will come over to your house during the apocalypse because I'm not, none of my stuff. Like I said, I'm just happy to be growing these tiny puny apples that I've got. Oh, well, darn it. Farmers markets for those who can't grow, and we actually do have a farmers market that meets here. That would be an awesome. Yeah. Four hens. Yeah, we can't have hens. We can't have chickens where we live. I'm very sad about that. I would love to go tour around New Zealand. Yeah, overbuilt New Zealand. I actually do want to go to New Zealand. It looks like a lot of fun. I also kind of want to go to Australia and look for the possible megalania that lives there, but New Zealand looks super awesome, to be honest. You know what? New Zealand was where they filmed most of the Lord of the Rings movies, but they also filmed Xena, Warrior Princess, and Hercules there, the Legendary Journeys. New Zealand looks amazing. More sheep than people who live there too. A little bit of trivia. Maybe stories from Noah's perspective. Okay, so Chado, I do have a third story that I was working on. It was called Antediluvian, and it was set during the reign of the Watchers. So just a thought. Yeah, overbuilt. A lot of some of them are still up in the air. Like I said, I'm not going to say that there were people who I think have clearly gotten it wrong, but there were others that I'm like, okay, I'm not going to discount them. So, like I said, I'm a wait and see. And yes, I absolutely said nerd porn. That's all Game of Thrones was, and you'll never convince me otherwise. So, okay, Amanda Grace. I like her, and there were things that she did prophesy that didn't seem to come to pass. However, my problem with her is that she fell in with the same kind of group as Mark Taylor did. I love Amanda Grace. I really do. I still like Mark Taylor. But he disappeared. She hasn't. But Mark Taylor's disappeared. Like I can't find anything to do with him. And I'm like, let's start hearing some things. My only problem is if you're gonna say something is going to happen, it better darn well happen. What's his name? There's a guy who he sort of patterned himself after, like he's different, but he's like, he even called himself like the new Kim Clement. I cannot remember his name to save my life right now. I can see his face. He was on Sid Roth all the time. Um, but it's like I keep hearing stuff from him, and I'm like, something's got to happen here. Like, I'm sorry, just being the pragmatist here. I'm not going to speak necessarily against someone, but at the same time, y'all kept saying stuff, but it ain't happening like at all. So it's a thing. Uh, so okay, channel has ended with. Oh, I want to go to. Mary H wants to go to Rarotonga. I have no idea where that is. Let me look. Let me look because I don't know what Rarotonga is. Okay, let's see. Let's see how it's spelled. R-A. O. Wow, that pulled up real fast. It's in the. Oh, it's part of the Cook Islands. Okay. Largest of the Cook Islands, a nation of 15 islands in the Central Pacific. Yeah, I know that. Volcanic peaks, ridges, and rainforests dominate its interior. Okay, let's see what pictures look like. This is what happens in the Hangout. But ooh, that looks pretty. Okay, so yeah, it's one of the Cook Islands. Yeah. Largest. Do we know of any cryptids that are supposed to live there? I ask only for for taxation purposes. I have to admit that's my favorite thing since I am technically an author. All my cryptid stuff and art stuff is put in like one little bin. Taxes, baby. Just saying, right off. That looks really pretty. Okay, that is officially on. It's part of the Cook Islands. You know what? That's officially on my list now. Thank you. Thank you for what. And Mary, I was actually thinking Tahiti, but this kind of looks better than Tahiti. I'm going to admit that looks amazing. Ooh, that looks fun. Okay, yeah. I'll see if I can talk my wife into it. Okay, so Nathan is actually finally. That's a great question. So Nathan is done with his. Yeah, tell me about it. I don't even want to look at the numbers, but you know what? What they don't know won't hurt them. I'm lucky to live where I'm at. Nathan is finally off of all restrictions. Well, not all restrictions. He can't play contact sports or things like that, but he couldn't do that beforehand because of his heart condition. So he's basically back to normal. He can bend over, he can do things. So he's doing very, very well. I just talked to Dr. Bob a couple of days ago, had a nice long conversation with him. He is doing much better. He is still in recovery. There's still a long road to hoe for him. But he's recovering. He's doing much better. And Alan seems to be doing well. Last I talked to him. So everything seems to be good. But yeah, Nathan and Dr. Bob are both, Nathan seems to be mostly recovered. He can go back to doing his normal life. And Dr. Bob is working his way towards that. So let's see there. Okay, so unfortunately, we've hit that point where I do need to go get my daughter because I suppose I shouldn't just leave her random places. I mean, I guess that's the thing, right? So I better go get her. It has been a lot of fun. We'll be here tomorrow. We will be, we're going over. We're still going to be going over where we were, the section where Jesus is talking about, not changing the law but fulfilling the law, and then what he does to make the law actually harder. Like that's the section we're in tomorrow. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow morning. For everyone, if you can't watch it live, that's perfectly fine. That's why we have replay. We love every one of y'all. Appreciate y'all coming in. Lots of new faces commenting. Right, that's wonderful to see. We love every one of you. Again, if you can't see the shows live, believe me, we get it. That's why I love putting this on YouTube, because a lot of people don't have a schedule that allowed them to do that. I know I didn't for years. So that's what I love about this. And you're still a part of the community, even if you aren't talking to us live, right? Y'all are doing great. I hope everyone has a great weekend or rest of the weekend. And do me a favor. I'm going to go ahead and in the broadcast, but you can comment, right? What you can say is, so again, book one. I want to get y'all's ideas on this one. Book one is the one where it's the guy with the sword from Eden who can see into the spiritual world to fight those sort of cryptids. Or book two is from this, again, is basically the story of Jesus from the spiritual perspective downward. And it's sort of, again, Game of Thrones, but from the spiritual perspective, from them down. Tell me which one you think you would do, or you think would be best. Like I said, just throw it in there. Just interested to hear what y'all say. I'm always open to other opinions. Right now, I got a little too much going on to do either one right now, but there's a lot to do to build up those stories, so we got plenty of time. Gene, don't do that to me. Gene's like, write both of them. Like, Gene. All right, I'm gonna say bye to all y'all. Y'all pop that in there. Gene, I appreciate your faith in me. I ain't got that kind of faith. But well, you know what? I may end up doing both of them either way. But I would like to hear what y'all's thoughts are. So y'all be good. I'll see y'all all tomorrow, and then later on. Gene, there's a lot of things that have left my mind. That's all I'm gonna say. Bye. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Then I'll see y'all on Daniela's show. Y'all be good. Bye.